We are the older kids, and this is a movie review. Hey everybody, I'm Matt.
I'm Angie.
And today we're talking about, as you probably could figure out, Star Wars: The Last Jedi. Woo! Now, before we get really into it, I just want to say that I know that this movie's been very, talked about a lot on the internet and stuff, and I know that we're a little bit late in this, but I feel like we do have some important things to say, and I know that I've wanted to do this for a while, since being a huge Star Wars fan throughout my entire life, ever since my brother got me into it when I was a little kid. I think that it's important to look at, where the direction that it's going, and sort of maybe this is the first step into it just being a culmination of Disney execs and, other people than really like a Star Wars movie. But I'm sure we'll get into that later. First things first, what we want to talk about is just sort of how The Force Awakens left off. Now, you had the last image where Rey is giving Luke the lightsaber, and he's got that really, deep expression on his face, and everybody after the movie was like, whoa! Like, what's going to happen next? There are a lot of theories on who Snoke is and what's going to happen with Kylo and everything like that. And, well, this movie did answer a few of those questions, but I'm sure we'll get into that later. Well, Angie, I'm going to ask you here, what were you most excited for coming into The Last Jedi?
Well, I think just kind of touching back on how The Force Awakens left off, even now that I've seen The Last Jedi and I know how they continue it, which was disappointing, I really enjoyed that ending scene in The Force Awakens. Even now, now that I know what happens next, it still kind of gives me chills. That's still,
For sure.
such a, pivotal moment. And then they just throw it all away, and it's so upsetting. They literally throw it all away. Literally. Right over the shoulder. Gone.
Yeah, we will get to that. Also, just in case you didn't know, it's a spoiler review, so you should probably know that already. But let's just start here right at the opening. Opens up with the crawl that we all know. Says some things, I'm sure. I didn't really pay attention to it. But we open up on sort of the First Order is going to take out the last of the rebellion or resistance, whoever you want to call it. And they're on that planet, and they've got this big old dreadnought ship, and they're going to shoot it down. And we start with Poe Dameron coming in with his X-Wing, and there's this scene between him and General Hux, and it starts off with a joke. Really, it does. It starts off with the "your mama" joke, actually, now looking back at it, which makes it even worse. But I think, there's where my first problem with it goes in. The humor, in not even in this part, but throughout the entire movie, makes little to no sense and really breaks up the pacing and sort of the feel of the entire movie. And really, Star Wars in general wasn't ever really that funny. If you're looking at even prequels and original trilogy, there were humorous parts, but the humorous parts were to, accentuate character traits. One of, the funniest parts to me from the original trilogy was in New Hope, and Han Solo, he's in the detention center, and he's trying to talk to those guys.
Everything's under control, situation normal.
What happened?
Had a slight weapons malfunction, but everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
We're sending a squad up.
Negative. We have a reactor leak here now. Give us a few minutes to lock it down. Large leak, very dangerous.
Who is this? What's your operating number?
conversation anyway.
Super funny moment, but it adds to Han Solo's character that he's a shoot first, ask questions later kind of guy. Now, what I want to ask you, Angie, is did you feel that the humor in this movie worked? Did it accentuate character development or anything like that, or did you feel it fell flat?
To summarize, no, it didn't work. But this, like, forced humor in movies is something that I already have a strong opinion about. I mean, I feel like in a lot of Disney's movies, specifically, like Star Wars now, Marvel, anything that they kind of take over, it's just this, it's so in your face and forced, and they draw it out as long as they can, and I just hate that. I don't like it. Like, especially in a situation where, like, between Poe and Hux, you're literally in war right now. You're talking to Space Hitler. You're not gonna joke around with Space Hitler. Like, it's too forced for me. Like going back to the older Star Wars films too, it did, like, bring about character traits, and it was subtle. It wasn't drawn out for 10 minutes. It was just like, oh, here's a little quip. We're gonna continue now. Like, it just worked better. It flowed better.
Yeah, it did remind me a lot of a Marvel movie. The forced humor, it was forced. I'm going to say one good thing I thought about the movie, it looks beautiful.
Oh, absolutely.
Everything about the movie looks spectacular.
The effects were fantastic. The shots were fantastic.
Yeah, cinematography was good. Special effects, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I had no problem with the way that the movie looked. It looked like a Star Wars movie. Mm-hmm. It looked even better than most Star Wars movies, really, to me. Like, probably the best shot Star Wars movie I've ever seen. But yeah, there's something that it does get right, and that's one of very small things.
It's just out of a handful.
Out of a handful.
Yep.
So anyway, we continue into the movie, and we start with a space battle, and I love space battles. That's probably my favorite part of Star Wars. Like you can even get rid of the Jedi and Sith, and if you just have more space battles in there, I'm game. I love space battles. And I did enjoy-ish this space battle. Like, it had every, factor of what a space battle is. You have the X-Wings, TIE fighters, and stuff. So, anyway, what's happening is the Poe Dameron and his team are trying to blow up the giant dreadnought, the planet killer or fleet killer, whatever they call it. And what happens is they bring in these really, like, slow-moving bombers. Like, so, I mean, if you looked into it, Rian Johnson really wanted to make it like a World War II-esque battle. So you have, like, these slow bombers being escorted by faster fighters, right? So anyway, what happens is the bombers, most of the bombers except for one, get blown up, and the last bomber ends up delivering the payload and destroying the dreadnought. There's been a lot of concerns on the internet about why they don't use the Y-Wings from the original trilogy, because those seem to be doing a lot better than these ones. The whole gravity in space thing, where the bombs, they're dropping from this little porthole, like, straight down. And in space, there is no gravity, as you know, so people are like, why are they falling down? Apparently, looking at the Star Wars Facebook, they say that the bombs were magnetized. But that's never explained to us.
Yeah.
That's another instance of things that are not explained to us in this entire series, this entire sequel trilogy. Like, and we'll get into that more later, because there's a lot more in this movie that is never explained. But I want to ask you, how did you feel about the opening fighter scene?
Well, altogether, I mean, I guess at the very beginning, I was interested. Like, it was holding my attention. And I was like, okay. I went into this movie with some poor expectations just because of everything I had heard going into it. But I had a little bit of hope there, because I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Like, starting off with a space battle. Action. Yay. And then it just kind of went downhill quickly. I didn't really like the bombers. I didn't really understand where they came from and why they chose to do that, because it clearly failed miserably. And
Well, it didn't fail.
I mean, that kind of depends on what you define.
Apparently,
as
they
success.
pulled off the mission, but in the worst
Barely.
way possible.
I mean, they lost, like, their entire fleet, and from the sound of it, the Resistance is now pretty small for some reason, and that was a pretty big hit for them. Like,
yeah, no,
I wouldn't consider that a success, and Leia didn't either, so.
That's true. And bringing up the Resistance, they're so tiny now. Like, there's literally 3 ships at this point. There's
Right.
3 ships. And I just sort of want to know what happened to the Republic. And I know that the Starkiller base in Force Awakens apparently destroyed their planets. But, like, a galaxy-wide Republic that was supposed to happen after the Empire was defeated. Like, I feel like it's so just wants to be the original trilogy. Like, the original trilogy, it worked because they were a rebellion, a small rebellion, guerrilla fighters. But now you have to flip-flop it, because why, after the Empire is defeated and the end of the original trilogy, it's like, okay, we've won.
You think they would have grown drastically.
Right, like,
after
okay,
that
we've got
point.
the Republic going, and now 30 years later, you're back at the same spot that you were 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, one of my major problems with the entire prequel trilogy is the original trilogy didn't accomplish anything. Like, Luke Skywalker went through his whole thing, they destroyed the Empire, and 30 years later, here they're fighting the same battle. Like, why even show the original trilogy at all if they know that it's not going to pan out?
Right, and it is like legitimately the same story with different names.
Yeah.
Like,
and I understand, like, The Force Awakens was pretty much a copy paste of what A New Hope was, and I think I understand it in a way that J.J. Abrams was like, okay, I know you guys didn't like the prequels, but here's something that you remember, like, nostalgia feels. Like, I will forgive it for that. Granted, I'm not a huge Force Awakens fan, but I understand why they went in that direction. But now you have pretty much, JJ sets up the entire movie, or the series for you, really. Like, okay, here's your main characters, here's what their questions are, this is sort of the foundation. And in this movie, Rian Johnson just sort of is like, yep, and like flips the table. Like, he's like, no, I don't want any of this. I don't want any of it. But we'll definitely get into that more later as well. Which brings us, actually, I want to do a quick shout out to the General of the Dreadnought. I don't know the actor who played that guy, but holy shit, his voice is amazing. It's beautiful, and he sounds like an Imperial officer, and why he isn't in Hux's position, I have no idea why. No idea. Shout out to you, man. Best character in the whole movie.
best 10
right
seconds
there.
of the whole movie.
Boom. Killed it.
That puny ship is too small and at too close range. We need to scramble out fastest. With the autocannons primed.
Bombers approaching.
Of course they are. Recharge the autocannons. Target that cruiser.
So anyway, the next thing we do is Finn wakes up from his back to bath, and he has another funny moment where he's like in the bags and falling around and stuff. And anyway, he's like, "Where's Rey?" And then we cut to Akato, the island that Luke is on, and we pick up right where Force Awakens left off, where Rey is showing him the lightsaber he used, this lightsaber his dad used. You know, there's so much meaning and feeling behind this, like, the lightsaber. And he just picks it up, looks at it, and throws it behind his shoulder. So nonchalantly, too. And at this point, too, I'm like, oh my god, what happened? Oh no.
Then he just walks away.
And he walks away. And that is something that's so not Luke and doesn't make sense. And like the pacing and the story, like people on the internet were very like, oh my God, what is Luke gonna do? Right?
Right.
And nobody saw this coming. What did you feel about that?
I mean, I mentioned it earlier, but I found that scene pretty heartbreaking. It was very disappointing. And I think, again, it was another attempt at some humor. I mean, that's how they played it off. Like, I feel like for anybody who's been a fan of the series for so long knows how important that lightsaber is and what it means that Rey is there to give it to him. Like, she's there asking for his help to save the galaxy, and he just blows it off.
He's like, no.
That's not funny.
Not
that's
dog.
terrible.
Right. It brings us to the entire character of how Luke is portrayed. He goes on later. He says, "I came here to die," and he's so just edgelordy.
Right.
if that's the correct word. It comes to the whole like major point of this movie being subversion. Like, I remember reading the reviews prior to seeing it for the first time, and the critics who loved it apparently were like, this subverts all your expectations. This is like unlike any Star Wars movie you ever felt.
Boy, is it.
And like, I liked that. I was so excited to see something that I've never seen in a Star Wars movie. And I was ready for it to go like darker and more grittier, which I heard this movie did as well. But it really didn't pay off in any of those subversions. The subversions were, hey, everything you thought was going to happen is no. And I think it works for some aspects of the movie, but for every single thing. And I read a thing I want to get your opinion on that said the reason that The Last Jedi doesn't work is that these Star Wars fans had so many expectations and their fan theories of, ooh, what's going to happen, who Snoke is, and all this stuff, that when they came into the movie and that wasn't what was happening and that's not what happened, they got all butthurt about it. Now, me, I try not to like theorize before I see a movie. I just like to get told the information because, I don't know, that's just how I am. What do you feel about that subject?
I think that you really have to be careful about which storylines and universes you're messing with, because Star Wars is such a pre-established large universe with so many theories and so much lore, and half of it Disney apparently doesn't think is canon, but whatever. I mean, this fan base is obviously going to have some expectations and some needs, and I think that it's okay to bring in something new and stray from maybe certain little things, but you can't just completely destroy it. Obviously, you're going to get a lot of backlash out of that, and I think that's kind of what they did here. Like, did they do things differently? Yes, but not the right kind of things. They messed with pre-established characters. They messed with really things they didn't need to touch at all. But they didn't mess with the storyline. The storyline is exactly the same. They just messed with all these little things that didn't need to be touched.
Yeah.
That's how I feel.
And another thing that I didn't understand about that sort of argument was these questions were given to us in Force Awakens. Like, they made a huge deal about who Snoke is. They made a huge deal about whose Rey parents are. Wow, that was funny. You know, and like as a film person, when a movie like is like, here are the questions you should like be worried about, those are the questions that we're going to worry about. And then in the movie where it's like, oh yeah, you were worried about that? Well, it's dumb. And you're dumb for thinking to be worried about that. Right. And I was like, it felt like a betrayal to really what was presented in The Force Awakens. And I just didn't understand that approach. When, okay, it's like somebody going up to you, they give you a book and they're like, this whole book is going to be on a test, but really focus on chapters 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
And then you go into the test and you really focused on 4, 5, and 6, and no questions from those pages are on the test. And then you go to the teacher and you're like, hey, I studied really hard, but I don't think there was any questions on this page. And they're like, yeah, but I said it was on the whole book.
Right.
But it's like, no, you said like this. So it just doesn't make sense to me about the subversion. And let's go in a little bit on Luke's character, because there's a lot that needs to be said there. What did you think about Luke? I'm gonna start there.
Okay. I disliked Luke throughout the entire movie, and that's not something I ever thought would happen. I never thought I would hate Luke Skywalker. Like, you don't hate Luke Skywalker. He's, like, literally the poster child of Star Wars. He's the main character. He's great. He's everyone's hero. And there was not one moment where I, like, respected him in this movie. Mm. And, I mean, I've gone on several rants about Luke and what I think should have happened, but, like, there are ways that they could have played off this new version of Luke that would have at least explained it to me and made sense. And I can go into more detail, but they didn't even explain it. Like, he just became a quitter. He has a terrible attitude. He's no longer a hero. He doesn't want to be a hero. Like, he's just given up, and that's really sad for who Luke is.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. His character is developed throughout the original trilogy. Like, we see him come from small farm boy in the first one to, okay, I think I'm a Jedi Knight, and then in finally Return of the Jedi, he becomes fully the Jedi that he needed to be to save the galaxy. And that is a Jedi that is selfless, who doesn't give up, who is always there for his friends when they need him. That's who Luke Skywalker is. And that entire story arc he has in the original trilogy is just thrown completely away. And you earn that. You have to earn his character change. And I don't think they earned it at all in this movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, oh, here's who Luke is now. And I was like, and they say, okay, yeah, he got all butthurt because Kylo Ren, his nephew, turned to the dark side and stuff like that. But again, this is Luke Skywalker, guys. The one who turned Darth Vader. Let me say that again one more time. Darth Vader, the most hated man in the galaxy, to turn to the good, you know? And I feel like in the movie it shows he sees Kylo Ren. He's just like spying on him when he's sleeping or something. And he's like, oh crap, he's got some dark thoughts. And like, dude, he's like a teenager.
Yeah.
Teenagers have dark thoughts.
Right.
They listen to My Chemical Romance.
They said I'm teenagers scared the living shit out of me. They could care less as long as someone to bleed. So darken your clothes, I'll strike a violent pose. Maybe it'll leave you alone, but not me.
In the most un-Luke thing, he's like, all right, better kill him. Like,
right.
What?
Well, and, like, yeah, like, just kind of like, I mean, basically what you said, but Ben, at the time, Ben was a child. Luke Skywalker let a child overthrow his entire, like, past because he saw, like, him do a bad thing maybe in the future. Like,
right.
That's it. No more! Kill him, we're done, burn the tree down, whatever. No more Jedi ever
fuck
again.
The Jedi! It's so uncharacteristic. And the only way I can see like this truly affecting Luke is if Kylo is 100% dark side. Like, because every time when he was talking to Vader and everything, was like, oh, there's a little bit of good in him. There's a little bit of good in him. That was his excuse to turn him to the good side. If Kylo Ren was just 100% evil, then I could sort of see him do that. Like in Force Awakens, Han Solo just walks across that bridge and he just decapitates him, just
right.
like, which would be
no
like,
second thought.
yeah, you know. But Kylo Ren is the most conflicted person of all time. Like he sways like a
Right.
branch in the wind, you know? So I don't understand why Luke isn't like, okay, I get it, dude. My Chemical Romance is dope.
Well, and God, like, the kid was sleeping. Like, Christ, give him a chance. It took him, like, 5 seconds to make this decision. He's like, nope, he's gone. Like, he could have, like, trained him, like, talked to him about it. Like, hey, there are two sides of the Force, buddy. You're kind of straying towards the wrong one. Let's fix that, not, oh.
Also, like, there's one person who understands the balance of the Force better than anybody, and that's Luke. Like, he had the same temptation from the dark side.
Right.
And he fought it, and he's like, hey, dude, I went through the same shit, bro.
Well,
let me tell you how it rolls.
And I don't know that that's something that would ever necessarily go away. The dark side is always going to be there.
It's always present.
And you can't have one without the other. So if you see even a sliver of it, you can't just assume that all is lost. But that's exactly what he did.
I agree. It totally betrays his character. And another, if we're just going off into like what we think could have made it a little bit better, I know that you brought this up a couple weeks ago. You were saying that he's on that island at like vagina hole of of the dark side there, and like in the when who is it? Yeah, when Kylo is telling his story of how Luke, and he's got that crazy like insane look on his face, like terrifying, absolutely terrifying. But then you went into it more like, what if he just on that island by himself went crazy, like Torrance in The Shining?
Right. And I think that's my strongest, like, opinion or suggestion or whatever you want to call it on this whole entire movie. Like, would it still be sad that Luke ended up this way? Yes. But at least explain it. He's on this island all by himself with the two, like, apparently strongest sources of the Force. I don't know if they're sources per se, but I don't know what you want to call
just
them.
icons.
I mean,
Force,
like,
sure,
they are there with him. He's in the middle of these two very strong opposing, like, fields by himself. Like, it wouldn't be too much of a stretch to say that Luke eventually just kind of lost his mind. And it would explain almost everything that Luke does poorly in this film. Like, and I'm sure we'll get into it more later, but like the moment where he finds out about Han Solo. The idea that he's not a hero, that he's not going to go help. Like, he's just lost these memories and this will to fight. And that's still very sad, but at least it would make sense, and it would have given this movie, like, I think the twist that it needed. Like, sure, there's the light side and the dark side of the Force, but what else can the Force do to you? Like, what does it do to your mind?
No, and I think that's a great way to look at it. And you know what? Maybe that's what Rian Johnson was thinking, but that didn't come across in the movie at all. Nobody, like, it never was touched on why, like, Luke just 180 completely, right, besides Kylo Ren turning.
Well, and I think it would have worked even just on, like, the most minuscule of levels. Like, Luke acts like he is mentally disturbed the entire time he's there. The scene with the milk.
Oh,
the scene, like,
man.
Everything,
going into it.
All of the weird things that he does could be explained by him just mentally deteriorating. He doesn't know who he is anymore. He doesn't know what's going on. And that's, to me, that's not, too much to ask for, is some sort of explanation like that.
No, and we do have to talk about it because it's there now. The first day that Rey is on Ahch-To, like, Luke gets up to do his daily routine and Rey follows him, right? And the first thing he does is he goes up to this alien, and I am not kidding if you have not seen this movie and you don't mind the spoilers. He goes up and, like, grabs the nipple of one and shoots its milk in, like, a little glass and then drinks it in front of her seductively.
Like a crazy person.
Like a crazy person.
It wasn't just like, oh, I'm gonna sip this milk. No.
He's like...
It's like all over his face, and oh, God. It's just... Why is that scene in the movie?
No! Somebody, he needs some milk.
And then, like, is it there for humor? Because I did not find it funny. I was just sort of like...
I was uncomfortable.
What the is going on?
Right.
And then he, like, flies around and, like, kills, like, this fish. And there's weird nuns. And it's just like he acts out of the ordinary. And the point of he just starts going crazy.
Right.
Is a really good, interesting plot point that I think could, be, developed more about, okay, somebody who's as strong in the Force as Luke, he starts, like, really, like, digging into Force and why the light and the dark are what they are, maybe. And he goes to the site of the first Jedi, and then there's the vagina hole, and it just starts, like, messing with him. Like, that, like, I can understand that, and then it gives him a little bit, by the end of the movie, a redemption, if you play it off that way. Right. It's not played off that way.
It's not.
We'll get into that later, boy. Oh boy. So anyway, let's talk about, before we move back to sort of the other plots of the movie. So Luke's on the island and he's like, I came here to die, even though he left a map to him in the other movie, which doesn't make sense. Anyway.
Don't come find me, wink.
So anyway, he locks himself in his room, and he's like,
up the music
don't come in here! It's not a phase, Mom! Anyway. And then Chewbacca breaks the door down, and he's like, Chewie, what are you doing here? And Rey's like, we came in on the Falcon. And he's like, the Falcon? And then he says, where's Han? And I was like, oh no, he's gonna cry. I'm ready to like lose myself. And it cuts away. We never get Luke's reaction to Han Solo, his best friend, his sister's husband, maybe. I don't know if they divorced or anything like that. But the man he went to war and won wars with, he finally figures out that the nephew that he trained kills him. That's an emotional point that we as an audience need to see. Maybe that's something that breaks him out of this muck that he's in. What did you think of that?
Again, just another major disappointment. I mean, throughout this entire movie, there were so many opportunities for just these really emotional, like, beautiful, dramatic moments. And they just didn't follow up on them. And I don't really know why. I don't, why they didn't let any of them follow through.
None of them. Literally none of them.
Not one.
Not a single one.
And I know that some people argue that Star Wars is meant to be more of like a children's film. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think this is one of the few series that actually mends
it really brings everybody together. Yeah.
Like, you can go see these movies at any age and enjoy them. But I feel like they catered so hard in this one towards, like, lightheartedness for, like, maybe for a younger audience. I don't know. It's Disney. So I wouldn't be that surprised.
But I don't really see it that way either. Like, there's death and, like, all this, like, really adult-themed stuff.
But they sugarcoated it like crazy.
Right. So it's like he made some really bold decisions that then he just took away. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what Rian Johnson himself, or if that's the execs at Disney.
Right.
Who are like, okay, we can't have anything that's, any sort of controversial, even though there's a lot of controversial stuff in the movie.
Right. And I mean, Han Solo's death in particular hits everybody so hard, whether it be the characters or the audience. I mean, you've got Luke Skywalker, and, like, he's the poster child, he's most important, whatever. And then just below him, I feel, is Han Solo.
I think more people like Han Solo than Luke Skywalker.
I do. Probably. They're Han probably about even, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, they're two very different characters. But they just let it go. I mean, this should have been, and this ties everything together for Luke, too. This is like all those bad premonitions he had about Ben. That was it.
Yeah.
He killed his own father without a second thought. That's what Luke was afraid of. But no, we won't, we don't need his reaction. It's fine. I'm sure he was maybe sad, or maybe he went and drank more milk.
Luke finds out about Han. We cut directly to Kylo Ren. And he's going, and he sees Snoke, and Snoke's like, you let a girl beat you? A girl who never knew about the Force? Like, which was a huge like plot point in The Force Awakens. Like, you are a trained Sith Lord. How did you let Rey defeat you? So, like, I'm glad that they brought that up a little bit in this, sort of mend that plot point. But anyway, Kylo says something, I'm sure, and then Snoke's like, take off that mask, you look ridiculous. In his, like, Playboy, like,
right.
vest and stuff. Anyway, so then, like, Kylo gets all, angsty again, and he, like, destroys his mask in the elevator, and he doesn't have it anymore. He doesn't have the Kylo Ren mask. And then he goes and he does a really bold move, and he blows up the bridge. And with all of the major players of the Resistance in there, because why don't they got shields, boy?
In the most important part of this ship? Nah, they're not gonna. No.
They wouldn't. They wouldn't dare. They wouldn't dare.
Really?
Anyway, so he shoots the bridge out, and actually he doesn't. I'm sorry, he doesn't. So him and his mom Leia have sort of a Skype call in their mind, and it's actually a really impressive scene. Mostly because nothing is said, and it's just their facial expressions. But as an audience, we know, okay, is he going to do it? Is he finally going to kill his mother? And he's got his fingers on the trigger, and we're all like, oh, and then he lifts off. And then, but, like, the two, like, side guys, they just blow it up anyway, and it sucks Leia out. And she's dead. And everybody else is dead out there. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty intense scene. Which originally I didn't like, because you have Leia die by these random people. Like, oh, who killed Leia? Yeah, fucking Rick and John here on the side. Buddy. Anyway, but I think I like it a little bit more thinking about it, because it adds... The best thing about it is Kylo Ren is not a character who's going to play by your rules. Ever. And the more I understand that, the more I like his character. I do not like Adam Driver playing his character, because I think he's blander than white bread. But the character of Kylo Ren himself is very interesting, in that you don't know what he's going to do next. He doesn't have a path that's clear, and that's something that's very different to Star Wars. You've always had, this guy's the bad guy and this guy's the good guy, and they don't really change except for Darth Vader. But I like that part.
It's one thing that I started learning to like Kylo for in this movie, is that he started to really actually visibly be conflicted with what he's doing. Again, they didn't follow through with any of that. But, I mean, for a moment, it was like, wow, Kylo, you actually feel things. That's awesome. That's character development. You might regret something you did. Great. But then they just kind of continued with it, and he went back to being himself. It was very back and forth. Like, he would have his moments of conflict, and then go immediately back to being Kylo Ren. And then he'd have more moments of conflict, and it just never followed through. But as far as specifically the scene with the bridge, I would say, I mean, I like that Kylo himself didn't do it. It's not really that far-fetched to me that two random men would do the job for him. I feel like that's war. Yeah. You can't really predict what's going to happen. That's a fair point. It is weird that there weren't shields on the most important part of the ship. But that aside, I mean, that could very well happen. They could get a lucky shot and blow up the leaders of this resistance.
Well, I want to bring up this point too. So what happens is after they blow up the dreadnought, the resistance ships hyperspace out of there, and Poe gets demoted because Leia told him to turn back, but he wouldn't because he's a flyboy who wants to shoot first, ask questions later, sort of thing. And it's like, okay, I can understand that, because if this is your flute and
This is your flute.
This is your flute.
Stop playing the flute.
I'm tired. I want to go to bed. And sort of, I understand that. And what happens next is the First Order shows up, and they're like, "How could they track us through hyperspace? Oh, they have a hyperspace tracker." Now, the very...
How convenient.
Right, how convenient. And apparently this was, after I watched Rogue One again, it was foreshadowed in that, when they're in, like, the giant database of the Imperial stuff, and she's looking through all this stuff, and it said hyperspace tracking. So I like that little bit of callback, but now you have this in the Star Wars universe where hyperspace tracking can be... done. Now, it's like... you can't hide. This guerrilla unit can't hide anymore, and it opens up a lot of plot holes. And I feel like in the 9th movie, they're gonna have to find a way around hyperspace tracking now.
Right. I mean, that's big. How do you escape that?
How do you escape it? Yeah, And I think it's poor writing and very just lazy writing for hyperspace tracking.
Yeah, they've kind of cornered themselves.
Yeah,
How are you going to get out? Like,
right.
What? How do you?
But what?
You can't track any better than that. Like, I don't.
Right, you can't. So anyway, we get to let's just get to it. So we see Leia floating out in space, and she starts to crystallize in a very downtrodden moment, but one that's I thought it was okay for Leia's death.
I thought it was very intense.
It was very intense.
I was, like, mentally preparing myself for how just depressing that is.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow, this is how they're eliminating this character.
Right, and I thought that it was, not what I expected her to go, but I thought, okay, that's a very interesting choice that I wouldn't been upset with,
right,
I feel, later on.
Wouldn't have been very unexpected, yes. But again... this is war. Like, that could happen. And if you're in space, if you get sucked out into space, that's how you die. Like,
right.
You immediately crystallize and you're done.
Well, I thought that was a nice moment, too, is like, so she floats out, she gets crystallized, and there's a little bit of light from a near star or whatever that flows out. And it's like, you know what? Yeah, Carrie Fisher is gone, but she will always be our space princess, just crystallized forever in space. And I was like, that's a good metaphor. I enjoy that. But oh boy.
As if they couldn't have made it any worse.
Oh boy.
What in God's name, Disney? What have you done?
So we cut to her hand, and then you see a finger move, and I was like, oh no.
Oh no.
Oh no!
This beautiful moment.
Oh, no!
I was like, okay, the tears were coming, and then they just sucked right back into my eyes. I was like, oh.
So, apparently, Leia constructs a force shield around her that blocks off all, the vacuum of space, and Superman's back into the ship.
Superman's.
Literally flies through space, back onto the ship. And everybody's like, what the hell? In the ship. Mm-hmm. Everybody in the audience is like, what the hell? Also, another part that really upset me about that is she gets on the ship and, like, goes to the door, and then they open the door to the bridge, and they bring her in. But there's a giant hole!
They open the door to space.
They should have all been sucked out there.
Knock, knock. Like...
Like, it's a small moment, but it really caught my mind. I was like, why are they not being sucked? Whatever. Like, at that point, I'm like, there's no rules anymore.
Yeah,
it's just literally whatever.
That is one thing that I feel was another, like, major failure for this movie was they lacked a lot of just basic physics concepts with space. Also, if Leia were to put a force shield, whatever, around her, she would have had to do that really quickly.
Oh, yeah.
To not immediately...
I guess she sort of knew since she saw what Kylo Ren was doing, but...
She didn't... Okay. I mean...
I'm just trying to be devil's advocate.
I know, but I don't... I know she's force sensitive, but I didn't realize she was, powerful enough in the force to do this in a split second and just back to the ship.
Not only that, I think that... And people have been waiting forever for Leia to use the force. I know that's been a big thing. But this is something, like, that I don't even think Luke was able to do. Like, survive the vacuum of space and fly around.
Right.
Like,
that
power was never brought up or anything like that in previous things. And I'm okay with showing new force powers. But this is so beyond what I thought Leia was capable of. And then there's no explanation.
No, they just take her back on, and then she immediately passes out.
She goes into a coma.
Which I suppose, yes, if you're using that much power.
Right, you would. That's fair. But even when she gets up later in the movie, no one's like, "Yo, what the fuck? What? You had this shit the entire time, and we're like fighting with. Why don't you just force power the Star Destroyer out of the way?" What are you doing?
Saved anybody else while you were at it there, Leia? All right.
Like, there's no explanation in the rest of the movie about her force power. And that would be my first thing. I was like, where did you learn that? She could have... If someone asked that, and she was like, Luke taught me, I'd been like, okay, a little bit dumb, but there's some explanation to it. But there's some explanation to it. But no, it's never brought up again in the rest of the movie. And it's such a cringe. Even cringier than the milk. Like, it was... it looked so wrong on screen. Like, even this, like, the effects of it looked bad.
It went from so beautiful to so painfully stupid so fast. And not to mention, I mean, that was chance number one to eliminate this character.
In a meaningful way, yeah.
In a meaningful way, yes. That was chance number one. They had several chances. Mm-hmm. But there's the first one they missed, and it would have been, in my opinion, a satisfying end.
Yeah, I would have been okay with it. And I know that Carrie Fisher didn't die until after the movie was finished. But, again, this is Star Wars and Disney. So I'm pretty sure you can afford some reshoots if you need to and change the story around to fit that. Because now, she doesn't die in this movie.
No.
So, and already, Kathleen Kennedy said, we're not going to have a computer-generated Leia. So now, the starting of the 9th movie, it's like, is the crawl just going to be like, Princess Leia died from... tripping or something, and that's how you get rid of one of the major characters of the Star Wars universe. Like, why make that decision? Do you have any idea why they would do that?
I mean, and I'm glad that they're not going to attempt to do a CGI version of Leia, because to me that would just be sad. It would be almost disrespectful in my opinion, but there has to be ways. I mean, this can't be the first time that this has happened while or after shooting a movie. I mean, it
happens. It happens. You did a disservice to one of the most iconic characters in the Star Wars universe, and it's sad that Carrie Fisher passed away. It really is. But as a movie franchise, as important as this and as huge as this, I feel you have to pay these characters the respect they're due, and that's a huge problem in this movie. And in the Force Awakens too, is like you have probably the most iconic trio in all movie history, and then you just don't care about them. And I would have been okay if you had a new like a sequel trilogy with none of that, with none of them.
Right.
Because in my head, I want my original trilogy to end when they're partying on Endor.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great way to send those characters off. I don't want those characters to die. I don't want to see them old. I don't, because they're so iconic in my memory and in my life that you can make so many stories in the Star Wars universe without having to involve these characters. And if you're going to make the choice to do it, you better do it right.
Right.
And they didn't.
No.
Not to any of the original characters.
Each, granted, we've really so far only had Han Solo, which was a sad end, but I get it. I got it. Kylo is evil, the whole thing.
I get, yeah.
So I wasn't too enraged about that, but they're just opening up opportunities for these disappointing ends to these iconic characters. That I don't get. There's no respect there. And now if I go back and watch the original trilogy and I see these characters back in their prime, I'm like, oh my god, this is how you're gonna die though. This is what's going to happen to you.
Exactly.
That's gonna be in the back of my head all of the time.
You're gonna see Luke who leaves Dagobah because he sees his friends in danger, and he's like, I gotta save my friends. And I'm like, no, you don't. Remember when you stopped that? Remember when you were not that, though, Luke?
Right, yeah.
You're not gonna be that. You're not gonna be cool no more. So anyway, yeah, Leia survives the vacuum of space, and it is ridiculous, guys. It really is. I can't even really put it into words how ridiculous it is, but whatever. So anyway, continuing with the story of the ship. So what we figured out is they only have fuel for 18 hours. Also, there's fuel in space. What? Never brought up before in a Star Wars movie. But okay, sure, I get it. Fuel is a thing. I'm sure going through hyperspace, you need some sort of actual fuel mechanism. But also, movement or objects in space will keep moving after fuel. It's space.
Right.
Another physics thing
yes,
that doesn't...
physics.
a thing doesn't just stop once it,
Right.
Orbit... the moon isn't, there's no fuel on the moon. It revolves around the orbit of the Earth.
Right.
So, anyway, so what we figured out is the Resistance only have these 3 ships left. And the First Order are right behind them. And they're like, they only have fuel for 18 hours, so we'll just wait it out. And we'll just shoot because they're too fast. The smaller craft is too fast for them to catch up for some reason. Anyway, and so Hux is on the ship and he's like, just keep shooting at them. And the shields are not... Apparently, now they have shields, too, by the way. All of a sudden, on the ship, they have shields. And the shields are too strong for any of their blasters to do anything. And here's your main storyline. Is a chase through space with 2 very slow-moving ships. What, I don't think you come up with anything as boring as that. And that's what it is. It's boring. I didn't care about any of it. I was like, we're back at the ship.
You have enough technology to track something through hyperspace, but not enough to just go a little bit faster. Just the slightest bit faster, and you would eventually catch up.
And the First Order is so big, so huge. And that in Poe Dameron in the beginning, he's like, that's a dreadnought. It's not the dreadnought. So in my mind, it's like, oh, they probably got another one stashed in there somewhere. Don't tell me Hux can't be like, boop, 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 boop. Yo!
What up?
Yeah, we got the Resistance here. They're literally 3 feet in front of us. You just want to show up in front of them? Yeah? Great. All right.
Boop.
Love you too.
Love
okay,
you.
Bye. It's it doesn't make any sense. The First Order is so massive. Why don't they have other ships just to shoot in front of them? Why take the time to wait it out?
Well, clearly there's this magical amount of space between them that they can shoot things with, because if you're too close, can't, no. If you're too far away, God, it's too small, we can't. So I don't know what this, like, perfect, beautiful, happy medium is that they can shoot things at. But God, they didn't find it either, so.
And also, I remember this from the movie, they were like, they had to bring Kylo Ren and the other TIE fighters back because they couldn't support them from that far away. Since when did they care about their TIE? Like, for Kylo Ren, like, yo, yeah, Kylo Ren, come back. Here, send a battalion of these guys to go kill themselves. The TIE fighters do damage.
Right.
They destroyed the bridge. Why couldn't they destroy everything else? I'd be like, all right, just go. They don't care. It's the First Order. That's what they do. They just throw bodies at things until it dies.
Right.
Like,
there's not a lot of, like, moral compass there.
No,
like,
no, it's just like Hux. I feel like Hux, man. Where is the Dreadnought guy? Bring him back.
Bring him back.
Bring him back.
Hashtag bring him back.
He had good ideas. Okay, he had great ideas.
He said one sentence,
and it was awesome. So anyway, that's the setup for your story. Is that the Resistance is trying to outlast the First Order. Because they're running out of fuel.
And let's just bring it back. 18 hours of
18
fuel.
hours of fuel. That's less than a day, I'm thinking.
Right.
So, anyway. Then we get into another subplot. Also, this movie is filled with subplots. Filled with them.
So many.
And it's like... You're going...
The pacing was... We were at a sprint.
It's the fastest slow movie I've ever seen.
Right, yes.
It's going so fast, but nothing's happening. So it's like...
It's just kind of stressful.
It's very stressful. So anyway, I guess we should get into the other part first before we get into Finn and Rose's part. So, with Leia down, the rest of the Resistance, they go into this place, and they're like, hey, all our generals are dead, including Akbar. Including Akbar, okay? Where is the justice in that? They're just going to kill off Admiral Akbar that way? One of the greatest rebellion generals of all time? Ugh, I'm sorry. That really peeved me off. I love Admiral Akbar.
Yeah, there was no... That was it. It was
It's just a glance over.
By the way, he's gone. Like...
Yeah, and he's dead.
Yep.
Go away. We don't like old characters here. Bring in new ones. And we're introduced to Laura Dern's character...
Oh my god. Who?
Admiral Holdo.
Oh,
A.K.A. Purple Hair.
Purple Hair.
And she is the most confusing person and the worst general of all time. But we'll get into that after we get Finn and Rose. So anyway, Holdo's plan is like, we're just going to stay on course because why not? Because she ain't going to tell Poe anything.
Right.
Because she's like, Poe, you're a hot shot. You're a hot shot guy, and I've met a lot of you guys before, and then you leave me. You screw me, and then you leave me, Poe.
Leave me alone with the kids.
Which, okay, maybe I understand that, but Poe is like your fleet general.
Right.
I feel like if you're going to tell a plan to anybody, like... tell him, but we're gonna get into that later. So anyway, Poe's like, okay, we have to do something, and Finn goes off, and he's like, I gotta go find Rey because she's hot, and I want to bone her. And I'm like, I get it, dude. I'm like, he's the only person that I was like, all right,
hey.
This is a story I can get behind.
Yes.
This is a story I can get behind.
Relatable.
So anyway, he starts heading to an escape pod, and is met by none other than what's her name? Rose.
Oh, God.
Rose.
It's not Shrek. It's
Rose. Who is this mechanic who works on the ship, who she's like first in like awe of Finn, like, oh, you're the Finn who destroyed Starkiller Base and all this stuff, and she's like, I've been like tasing people trying to leave and whatever. So then she figures out Finn is trying to leave and tases him. So they figure out that to stop the hyperspace tracking, they're tracking it from Snoke's like main ship, is what they found out. Because also Finn washed the deck of the hyperspace tracker. It's in the movie that Finn said
Yes.
Why aren't you telling other people that?
Everyone's got a secret.
Why aren't you? Hey guys, they got a hyperspace tracker, bro.
Right.
What the hell?
He didn't think that would be
he was
important.
supposedly a janitor on Starkiller Base
he
too.
was in hygiene or whatever it's called.
How are you on both things? Anyway, so they decide they have to find a code breaker to get onto the Snoke ship to disable the hyperspace tracker, and then they are able to hyperspace out. So then they call their good friend Maz Kanata from Force Awakens, little butthole eyes, Orange Yoda.
Oh my god.
And then what follows is a very weird sequence that she is in some sort of union battle and is like shooting around and like
She's in a shootout.
she's in a shootout but talking in this hologram because that's how holograms work now. And is like, oh, I wish I could do it, but you're gonna have to find this guy on Canto Bight who will help you get into the ship. So Finn and Rose are like, okay, we're gonna go to the planet, get the code breaker, break onto the ship, shut off the hyperspace tracking, and then we can get out. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna end it here. This would be the first part of a multi-part series. I know it's long, but I did want to get through everything. So thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.